Welcome to Fleet News Group podcast, where we talk about all things to do with fleet and particularly sustainable practices. I'm Caroline Falls, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Steve Nuttall, a director and partner at Sydney-based research group Fifth Quadrant, formerly known as ACA Research. We're going to talk about some of the research that his team do in the fleet space. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Great to be here. Really looking forward to our conversation. I love the podcast. I think you guys cover some fabulous material. You get some great guests on. So, thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's certainly great to have you here. I've actually been wanting to get you on for a while. You're always a very engaging speaker at conferences I've heard you talk at, and also a great conversationalist at dinner. I was lucky enough to sit next to you at the Australasian Fleet Managers Conference earlier this year. Now, into the business we're here for, can you outline, the various research projects you do in the automotive space, and specifically any that, probe the fleet industry?
Sure. Well, we've been doing research in the fleet space for maybe nearly 20 years now. A lot of that work we do directly for individual clients who tend to be fleet management organisations. We also do a lot of work in the fuel card space for all of the leading providers of those kinds of products as well. We've established, deep relationships and deep category expertise as a market research company in the fleet space. And I think we are the only organisation that has that length and breadth and depth of category expertise and understanding that how that market's evolved. We've built up strong relationships with those providers into fleet, but also built up really strong relationships with AFMA as well. So every 2 years we do an in-depth study of fleet managers in collaboration with AFMA. You've seen me present that at previous conferences, the Australasian Fleet Managers Annual Conference, usually that keynote speech, and that is based on an extensive survey of fleet managers, which allows us to, for example, assess the size of the market, how the market's changing, what the priorities are for fleet managers, what challenges they face and how they're overcoming those. And each time we present, we find a new angle and story to tell around that. We've also done 2 pieces of research looking at EV adoption in fleets. So that first piece was done in 2020 with AFMA and AEG, you may edit that bit, with AEG and AFMA. We've repeated that again this year in collaboration with New South Wales Government, AFMA and AMPOL, and that is a detailed look at fleet EV adoption and how fleets are making progress on their EV journey. So, like I say, we do bespoke work and we do work that makes its way into the public domain through our partnership with AFMA.
So, are you presently working on anything or wrapping anything up or about to start a survey of the industry? I think you said that the latest fleet research results were, earlier this year.
Some research we presented at the AFMA conference, and that was really kind of looking at how fleets are digitizing their business to become smarter fleets, looking at what prioritization is given to investing in software and connectivity solutions to digitize the management of their fleet. And so, we're identifying a group of leaders in that piece of work, and they're really interesting because they've got a very different set of priorities. The way in which they're going about electrification is interesting because they're kind of joining up the dots there between the need for software and hardware to be able to take full advantage of electrification. So that was a piece of work we did release at the AFMA conference. But more recently, we're doing the latest piece of research being presented on the 23rd of November, or if you like, Caroline, I could say, on the 23rd of November, we presented the Electric Vehicles in Business Fleets report in conjunction with AFMA and AMPOL. And that's really kind of our latest research. It looks at how Australian fleets are gearing up for widespread EV adoption. It's looking at what's driving uptake in terms of sustainability and corporate responsibility. And it looks at the kind of policy interventions that will help to accelerate EV uptake in fleets. So that was a really interesting piece of our most recent research. And then next year, we're in the process of talking with AFMA about the next piece of the large fleet management study that we present at the conference. So we're in the process of mapping that out, planning for that, and that's obviously going to be presented at the May conference again next year.
I love the way when you talk about the findings that you pull out what the leaders in the field and what they're doing and how they point the way to best practice and also to the future. So can you talk about what you mean by the leaders and maybe give us, a couple of pointers from the leaders from your recent studies and maybe how they've been changing over the years that you've been conducting the survey?
I think what's really interesting about the leaders is that they are working on and managing and balancing different priorities. So if we look at the way in which the leaders are, for example, tackling goals around sustainability and what's driving that, what we're finding is that leaders, they're looking to what's driving their business sustainability metrics is they ultimately, from a corporate responsibility perspective, want to decrease carbon emissions, but they also want to achieve cost savings at the same time. And so being able to reduce their energy consumption as a key metric helps them both reduce carbon emissions and save money at the same time. So that's an example of how a leader is figuring out how to kind of balance those different kinds of metrics. What we then also see is not only are they being able to reduce, in terms of outcomes, not only are they able to reduce their running costs, but they're also looking at how they can then use that to become more efficient as a business, so increase business efficiency, better asset utilization. And then when you kind of look at examples of what a leader is doing around that, they're looking at things like pooled vehicles and online booking systems and fully integrated fleet management platforms. And these leaders take a much more kind of holistic perspective. And I think that as fleet managers, they are also more influential in their organization in the sense that they're part of conversations that are shaping the strategy and future direction of the company. And they can do that because, they are well armed with a lot of data. They're quite comfortable about how to interpret and use that data to inform strategic business decisions, which means that they then earn the trust of their peers, and they're kind of brought into the tent more because the conversation about how we digitize our business, how we turn our business into a clean, how our business can make better use of clean energy technologies, electrify your fleet, etc. They are becoming part of that conversation. Whereas you look at kind of the laggards, they're very much just kind of order takers. You tell me what to do. This is what's on the menu. Pick and choose, and I'll give you what you want. There's no real kind of input whatsoever into a more strategic conversation. And so I think what we're also seeing, Caroline, is growing gap between that kind of laggard profile and the leader. And because the leader organizations are really kind of making these investments, so for example, investing in digitization allows them to really kind of scale up their operations, and the gap starts to grow. And so they're then able to build out a team that helps them drive that change as well, and they're more effective at leveraging internal and external stakeholders, whereas laggard is all kind of business as usual. And that, I think, is I think we need to, it's great to see what leaders are doing, but we need to look at what we can do to reward and incentivize the laggards so that they can make progress as well. Because my concern is, those leaders, they tend to be larger fleets, which is good because it means that, ultimately that impacts more vehicles and more people. Those laggards tend to be kind of smaller and medium-sized fleets, but there's many more of them. And, they're much more harder to influence as well. So I think that's a challenge and a concern as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's really interesting how you want to sort of work on the laggards. Just leaving them aside, though, for a moment, I just wanted to get you to talk a little bit about ACA research changing to Fifth Quadrant. So I'm not really sure if it's just a name change, or is it coming together with a different business from elsewhere? Like, what was that all about?
Good question. And we've for many, many years operated the two brands, running two websites. Behind the scenes, it's exactly the same bunch of people. We always felt that we had a very good, strong, interesting, future-facing brand in Fifth Quadrant. And I think when we kind of explored that more with our clients and the view of that versus ACA research, kind of the feedback was that ACA research is all good and solid and dependable and reliable, but it didn't really have that future focus brand association that Fifth Quadrant has. So we wanted to kind of bring those two elements together, really kind of our expertise in automotive and a bunch of other categories that we have worked in as well, and align that with this much more future-focused offering that Fifth Quadrant is about. Ultimately, we are about helping clients make better decisions using our expertise and layering that and the contextual understanding that we have on top of the data that we have to allow clients to make better business decisions. And ultimately, we talk about it as unlocking tomorrow's opportunities today. That's where the kind of the two elements of what was ACA and Fifth Quadrant comes together. So, we've gone through that rebrand. We're still the same people, but I think we now have a much better position in our marketplace to deal with some of the challenges that we're seeing, locally and globally, economically. It's just more efficient for us as well, just to manage one single brand rather than two brands.
Just back to talking about the leaders, like you mentioned that they tend to be the bigger, corporates or bigger fleets. I'm just asking because I was recently reading, and I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was about fleet electrification and how while almost universally today every fleet has an intention to go electric to some degree, it's the smaller, I guess, more nimble fleets that are jumping in early, and acquiring vehicles. So the bigger company fleets tend to do a lot more planning, I guess. Do you have any comment on that?
Absolutely. And I think, preparing for electrification is not about just going out and buying vehicles. It's about planning for that in a systematic way. I think once you've just gone out and purchased them, well, then you've got to kind of ask questions. Where and how are we going to charge these vehicles? Will our are they back to base vehicles? Or are they vehicles that are going to be charged at home? If they're going to be charged at home, have you thought about what kind of charging equipment you want your drivers to have when they're at home? Have you thought about how that's going to be reimbursed? If it's on site, have you thought about what the load requirements are? Have you spoken to your energy provider? Plan for that. Have you thought about whether you need fast chargers or overnight chargers? All of these, I think, are really important considerations. And if you're not, if you're just thinking going out buying an electric vehicle is going to kind of get you to a high level of maturity, unfortunately, that's wrong. You've got to think about power distribution units. You've got to think about energy storage systems. You've got to think about bi-directional charging inverters. You've got to think about smart grid management systems. All of these are, really important considerations. And, as I said, on top of that, what are the home charging requirements that you need? It's a much more complicated decision than just going out. It's different to going out and buying an ICE vehicle. An internal combustion engine vehicle, you're just weighing up the models and looking at, potentially looking at considering total cost of ownership and lease versus purchase outright. It's a fairly straightforward decision. This is a different kind of decision.
Just touching as well, you've mentioned a few times, how fleets are digitising, but just on tech and telematics in fleets, it just always surprises me when I hear stats that it's not, ubiquitous. And even great big telematics companies, boast of having 1 million cars connected, and it's like 1 million, that's not very many. Why is it so hard to penetrate, fleets and particularly small fleets, and what can we learn from the leaders in this space?
Well, I think, again, leaders place a much higher priority on increasing vehicle safety, and obviously telematics help with that. Leaders place much more emphasis on asset utilisation and productivity and efficiency, and telematics can really help with that. Data from telematics systems, when used to kind of optimise how vehicles are driven, can help you reduce your running costs significantly. That can be fuel consumption, it can be brakes, it can be tyres. So they can see how to get the payback on telematics. I think they also, as I said earlier, I think they're more data savvy decision makers. And so, for them, I think they're more predisposed to working with software platforms that give them more data to help them make smarter decisions. So I think it's, I think there are others out there who just don't buy that. I mean, whether because they don't really understand the benefits from a safety perspective, they don't understand the benefits from a business efficiency perspective, and I think it's often bought by fleets that have got heavy commercial vehicles, because from a risk management perspective, it's much of the compliance requirements sit on those fleets that have got trucks, heavy commercial vehicles, and fleets that have got largely passenger vehicles in there and so on don't see the benefit. And most telematics companies will tell you that's the hardest use case to persuade a fleet manager to have those units fitted into a passenger vehicle. I think the other point also is that a lot of the passenger OEMs supply their vehicles now with some level of inbuilt tracking capability in there as well. So tracking solutions are becoming a little bit more democratized, in the sense that kind of everybody's can get one and turn it on if you want. Same in passenger vehicles, and I think we're getting more used to using different kinds of tracking software from a consumer perspective as well. So, I think the solution doesn't have to be for a smaller fleet, give them telematics. That may well be the solution that's right for a large fleet with heavy commercial solutions. I think you need to come up with a more suitable and tailored solution that's right for a smaller fleet that has more passenger vehicles in it, because there's still benefits. My 17-year-old son who's about to turn 18, I need to get a dash cam on the car because it'll save me money when he has a scrape.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. So basically, the tracking's coming whether you want it or not. We started the conversation with you mentioning some of the greatest concerns of fleets being cost and sustainability. And I just wondered, you're saying you've got 20 years experience in this automotive space of automotive research. So just to finish off, I'd love to get your observations on how that concern for the environment, caring for the environment, caring about sustainability has developed in recent years. What do you see?
I'll try not to wear my cynical hat here because, there is some elements of greenwashing going on there, which I think we have to be quite conscious of. And I think we need to kind of distinguish between the real changes that are being made from a sustainability and from the more, kind of cosmetic changes that are being made. I think where we have to make real change is where we're seeing the change. It's not coming from within the fleet manager. It's being driven from the top. So this will come out in the work that we've recently completed with AFMA on EV electrification. What I think is really interesting when we look at some of that data is who's really making the decision here around investing in both vehicles and EV infrastructure. And it's being driven by CEOs, to some extent by heads of finance, CFOs, and more so we're seeing sustainability managers being part of that conversation. And I think what the shift that we're seeing is more senior, more influential stakeholders for whom, and again, it tends to be bigger organisations that have to account for shareholders. It also tends to be public organisations, but public sector organisations, so government, particularly local and state government, that are actually really properly embracing sustainability, where this is part of a bigger project. And that means that, behind the scenes, they're investing in solar, they're investing in how they can then store the energy that they collect through solar and then put that back into the grid. So they're really looking at that kind of bigger picture. And therefore, that means that, ultimately those organisations will have EVs that are being charged through clean energy sources rather than from coal energy sources. And so those organisations are making the real change, but I don't think there's many of them. And I think there's a lot of organisations making a lot of noise, but no real action. And we'll see but the question is, how fast will we move to the end point that we need to be at, which is, really kind of a wholesale, a complete rethinking of how the business as a whole consumes energy, where it consumes that from, and how it does that in a clean and efficient way.
Thank you for your thoughts today, your insights, Steve. Fascinating as always. Really appreciate you making the time for us, and I hope our sound editor can do something with that sound quality.
I hope it comes across okay for the listeners. But no, pleasure speaking to you, Caroline.
You've been listening to Fleet News Group podcast. It was edited and produced by Isabella Fiorentino. You can follow us on Spotify. Just search for Fleet News Group. We're also on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. Our website is fleetnewsgroup.com, where you can get all of our stories, videos and podcasts. Until next time, drive safely and take care.